Oh, hey there. Happy Halloween. I would offer you some candy, but still, no stores. Also, I'm kinda running low on the canned goods. And I'm starting to hear strange noises from the hallways. That can't be too good. But that reminds me of a game. Look Outside takes place during a Lovecraftian apocalypse. A strange phenomenon happened outside, a visitor from outer space appeared, and everyone who caught a glimpse of its presence got warped into horrible mutations. You are just a regular tenant in an apartment building that is slowly being overrun by these horrible creatures, trying your best to survive, and maybe even help the few somewhat normal people caged in with you. I guess it's as good as any game for Halloween. The premise is spooky enough, and who knows, it might keep my mind off anything going on outside. So even though the game has some disturbing moments and can get quite dark, it's not really a horror game, at least not outright. A lot of moments are just there to weird you out. The game can even get a bit cute at times. Yeah, it's spooky themed, sometimes gory and bloody with elements of actual horror and terror. But when it comes down to it, this is more so a dark fantasy RPG. It's closer to Horrorvale, or maybe Undertale, than Resident Evil, or, for an example with a similar gameplay style to this, Sweet Home. You're not exploring an abandoned haunted house all by yourself, although this apartment building is certainly haunted. This here is the whole game world, full of weird and colorful NPCs, shops, quest givers and party members to find. Oh, and you really want to gather some friends, or whatever they are, and have them fight alongside you, because this makes surviving this apocalypse of the weird so much easier. When the game starts, you're on your own, just a normal dude, not particularly suited to dealing with monsters and the like, not that anyone asked you. You wake up one morning and have the urge to look out the window, as if someone or something is calling out to you, which is a bad idea. A voice from behind the wall stops you. Your next door neighbor Sybil seems to have nothing better to do than watching you through little cracks in the wall. Since she has been unemployed for a little while now, she seems to have too much time on her hands, so she comes over once in a while for a little chat. Over to the wall, that is. She doesn't actually visit the apartment. Not like the many other colorful characters, but I will come to that later. And she has a conspicuously broad understanding of this whole situation. We can chat with Sybil each morning and whenever we've been out exploring for a few hours, and this contextualizes the save system. Like, we're telling Sybil about the things we've witnessed or discovered. But what do I mean with exploring for a few hours? Is this game on a timer? Well, kinda. But it's not a real-time timer like in Majora's Mask or Dead Rising, but more a calendar management game, like, for example, the Persona series. Everything you do moves the clock forward. Certain events or conversations in your apartment, cooking and crafting of course, as well as other activities move time forward, ranging from a few minutes to as much as 2 hours, depending on the activity. Sleeping moves time forward to the next morning. And while you're out and about, every time you discover a new room, time will move forward a little bit, indicated by a progress and danger bar at the bottom of the screen. Building this up does 2 things, well maybe 3 things depending on how you look at it. A higher damage level increases the chance of wandering monsters to appear and ruin your day, but it also grants you an experience bonus when you finally return to your apartment. And as long as you have at least reached the first milestone, enough time has passed for Sybil to return and be ready to listen to your story. The actual time of day itself has only minor relevance to anything. You can't go to bed if it's too early in the day, so you can't just skip to the end of the apocalypse, and at night there are fewer people roaming around the building, implied by you not getting random visitors to your apartment. From what I've seen, there are no special events or encounters during the night, and there's even an achievement for not sleeping throughout the whole duration of the story. At first I thought there would be more dangerous monsters out at night, but this seems to be wholly tied to your danger level. So yeah, speaking of danger, let's leave the apartment and see for ourselves what happened to this place. When we step out for the first time, there's not much to do. We have one straight hallway with a bunch of locked doors. Even the door to the stairwell is locked with a padlock. So pretty standard yet welcomed tutorial stuff. You get a small area in which you can get accustomed to the game's systems and mechanics before the game world opens up to you. For now, following that bloody trail is the only worthwhile, though not advisable, thing to do. It leads into the only accessible apartment other than yours. It appears to be empty, although the TV is still running, so whoever's living here shouldn't have been gone for too long. If they are still living here. Being alive, I mean. There's a few items lying around in here that you can take for yourself. Among them, a weapon. Maybe you want to equip it, just to be sure. The blood trail leads deeper into the apartment, through another door. Into the bathroom. It seems the resident of this home is actually still here, but he doesn't look all too well. Approaching him gives you a kind of first-person close-up. It's the standard way battles are presented in RPG Maker games. Oh, yeah, this is another RPG Maker game. Some of them have gotten pretty good, I have to say. Yeah, anyways. This is the standard battle screen of RPG Maker games, but the game also uses this perspective for cutscenes and certain more important conversations. So at first we're just gonna try to talk to the guy. Maybe he's in need of help and oh god, he has a knife. Alright, let's just smack the guy in the head and... What is he doing? Why is he doing this? Why isn't he doing this to us? What's wrong with you? Ah, alright, he's a weird eye mutant. That's a good enough explanation for me. This is our first glimpse of what happens to the people that have looked outside. And it's remarkably done. This little animation is so well made, the low angle giving it a Hitchcock-esque creepiness, and the manic smile, and of course the giant eye emerging from the bloody wound, turning it into outright bizarre horror. Now this is already one of the more elaborate animations. You won't get to see too much of this, but it's a great opening move to really get you hooked. There are a few more animations that are more complex, but it's not, let's say, a common occurrence. Most of what you see is in this top-down perspective, or mostly stills in first person. But even without a lot of moving parts, the pixel art stays horrifyingly detailed, consistently. These are some satisfyingly freakish designs, some sick and perverted creativity on display. This seems to be the signature style of the game's creator. The gloomy colors, the tired expressions of the survivors, and the horribly distorted abominations that could only be envisioned by someone who has looked behind the veil of reality. If this here speaks to you, then check out his itch.io page. And as for the combat, since we already started beating up our neighbors, it's, well, RPG Maker combat. Turn-based battles, JRPG style, in where you select your actions, and then your and the enemy's agility stats decide who goes when. You can use standard attacks or select special abilities, defend or use items. And if the game were straightforward about all this, it would have already been enough. But nothing in this game is straightforward. The mechanics are as crooked as the designs. The first thing about the combat the game teaches you is weapon durability, something the RPG Maker doesn't really support with the base mechanics. But the game goes about it rather cleverly. Every use of a weapon, be it a normal attack or a special ability, has a chance of damaging it. The weapon itself doesn't actually get damaged, but rather exchanged for an alternate version of the weapon, with lower stats, a different icon, and another name and description reflecting the worsened condition. I guess the game runs a script in the background checking the weapon's durability against a random number generator, and if the roll fails, the weapon gets swapped for the weaker version. And if it's already on the weakest version, it just gets removed from your inventory. That means pretty much every weapon exists in two versions in the game's database, with some exceptions. For example, a sledgehammer that can sustain a bit more damage, and so has an additional variation before it's destroyed. It's a rather unique approach to a weapon durability system, and one I very much like. Instead of having a number attached to each weapon that decreases with every strike until the weapon breaks, every use of the weapon has a random chance of breaking it, with some abilities increasing their chance dramatically, in exchange for more damage or negative status effects. This decision surely wasn't completely by choice, but more so due to the engine's limitations, which just doesn't track weapon durability. You could tie a variable to a weapon to represent its durability, but then you'd need to create a variable for each and every weapon in the game, and this is not feasible. So the developer had to come up with a more workable solution and build the systems around it. It works well in the game, especially since you'll find a whole lot of different weapons. It's hard to run out of weapons, though they differ dramatically when it comes to the damage they inflict, so you want to use them carefully and swap them in and out strategically. But this isn't all when it comes to the weapons. In addition to the expected stats, like hit chance and damage, there's also reach. Short weapons can only hit enemies right in front of you, while longer reach and ranged weapons can hit enemies further back. Sometimes when a fight starts, some of the enemies start off pretty far away. They can't attack you with regular strikes, but they do sometimes have some ranged attacks themselves. And each turn they slowly approach you, until they're right in your face. And this is also something that's not really supported by the engine, and made work with some creative trickery. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to your loadout. Can your attacks reach far enough? What type of damage do they inflict? Do they require resources, like for example ammunition for ranged weapons or gasoline for the chainsaw? Do you wield them in one or in both hands? And each weapon brings their own set of abilities with it, like stun abilities for blunt weapons and bleeding inflicting stats for your edge weapons. Stuff like that. So your moveset is ever changing, with your weapons breaking or you're just plainly finding better ones. And some of the skills your characters permanently learn might require a certain weapon type. Not every character can carry any weapon, and some weapons have certain requirements. Firearms are always in your left hand, and large weapons require both hands. So just another thing to keep an eye on. The combat system is incredibly varied due to that. Your strategies constantly change with the weapons you equip, especially during the early game, when you can't afford to be picky and take what you can get. Not so much later on, when you have a lot of everything and can mostly stick with your preferred ability loadout. Though there are some powerful late game weapons that entice you to change up your tactics, in exchange for higher damage output. Other equipment pieces are, at least gameplay wise, pretty standard. You have different types of body armor as well as a slot for jewelry or accessories. And all these raise your stats or give you immunity to certain ailments, or maybe let you use yet another special ability. But they are creatively implemented in terms of contextualization, with, for example, the trilby head raising your ranged attack damage, and there are some equipment pieces that affect certain scenes or interactions. You really need to stay on top of the state of your equipment and all your abilities. You never want to find yourself without a weapon during combat, and you want to take advantage of ailment-inflicting attacks to survive the often rather challenging fights, especially since the enemies themselves use them frequently. Many of their attacks leave you panicked, which prevents you from using your own special attacks. They often inflict bleeding wounds or infect you with all kinds of diseases, causing damage over time. They can stun or send you to sleep, or they can charm or confuse you, making you unable to strategically pick your targets and even hurt your own allies. You can cure those status effects with the many items you find all around the buildings. But here again, the game puts a not all that common spin on things. Many of your consumables cannot be used during combat. You can swallow some pills or chuck a tonic mid-fight, but that's pretty much it for the most part. Later in the game, you will find some powerful healing items that can be used during fights, but for the most part, you have to do your healing outside of combat, with first aid kits and bandages and the like. And of course, food that you can find or cook for yourself with ingredients you plunder from your neighbors' fridges. Some items also have combat utility. Dishes and silverware can be thrown at enemies in the back. Molotov cocktails or grenades deal a lot of damage and set the enemy on fire or cause bleeding. Same with the weapons, you'll find a lot of usable items and you should experiment with them a lot and try to always have a good variety on hand, because they can make your life so much easier. Combat in and of itself isn't especially hard, but you often encounter enemies that are a lot harder than the other monsters in the area, and most enemies regularly inflict negative status effects that prevent you from fighting back effectively. Healing also isn't that easy to come by, especially early on. You don't have many ways of healing during combat, and even outside of combat, the resources you have only grant you a bit of health, and stamina is even harder to come by, mostly restored through food items. The low amount of stamina your character has in the beginning is actually a really welcome design decision, because it keeps you from spamming your special abilities that are generally a lot more powerful than your standard attack. playing into the methodic nature of the combat system. And leveling up doesn't really make you more powerful in the traditional way. Your strength, agility, defense and whatnot never changed throughout the game and are only augmented by your equipment and certain passive effects. So you want to keep that in mind when you equip a powerful weapon. You don't want to run out of strong weapons at the end of the game and fight the more powerful monsters with your weak starting weapons. Leveling up does raise your HP and stamina though, so you do become a bit more durable, and with more stamina, you begin to rely more on your special attacks to deal extra damage in various ways. So the game becomes a lot easier later on, though it never becomes a walk in the park, in part because of the save system. Since time moves forward with each new room you explore, during the first few hours of the game, your danger level accumulates pretty quickly, causing stronger enemies to appear, and you will also get faster worn out due to hunger and exhaustion. Yeah, that is also in the game. I will come back to it later. Saving actually becomes a bit of a problem later on in the game, or if you get stuck on one of the few roadblocks, because when there's no more new rooms to explore, time also stops progressing and you don't build up enough time to unlock the save option again. This means the game becomes more punishing the longer it goes on, because dying sends you back farther than it would have earlier in the game, with more fresh rooms to explore. Well, on normal that is. There is an easy mode that autosaves in intervals and is generally less demanding. Normal is a good difficulty though, challenging but very manageable, even with the many ways you can cut your run short and trigger a game over, many of them entertaining, but the game doesn't screw you over without warning. I mean, it doesn't warn you about everything. Some dangers are pretty self-evident, but the game tells you in an immersive way when an enemy is just too strong for you, or when you leave the apartment without saving. This tells me that the many ways to die aren't meant as a punishment for the player, but as something to actually try and seek out, to fully immerse yourself even in the grim moments, even if it means losing progress. Though for that, easy mode is the better choice, because why would you go for the opportunity to die a horrific death if that sends you back half an hour or maybe more? The way progression in this game is designed is in a somewhat open and non-linear fashion. The game is divided into a handful of different sections, all of them giving you some optional areas to explore and multiple objectives to complete in any order you like. You start on the 3rd floor and need a way to unlock a padlock leading to the stairwell, which you find in the one other apartment that's currently open to you. Later, more of these doors will be open. After unlocking the stairwell, you get access to the 2nd floor as well, where you can find a secret way to the 1st floor. To open the ground floor and the basement, you need to actively engage with the game's main campaign, for lack of a better word. Your goal is to meet up with a group of 4 astronomers who all hide out somewhere in the building, and collect a handful of items for them connected to that weird visitor, to get a chance to communicate with it, and maybe find a way to save what's left of humanity. What kind of items you need isn't all that obvious from the start. The astronomers give you a hint, and Sybil might elaborate more on this when you return to her. But you still need to explore and search diligently to find these so-called offerings. None of them are just sitting there for you to take them. They are either tied to a multi-step side quest, or in an out-of-the-way place you need to accomplish a few other things before you can access it, or behind a mini-dungeon that came to be in this strangely warped building. And this building got really warped, as much as its inhabitants. One floor got turned into an endless labyrinth, one apartment became a war zone with ever-expanding trenches, where the newly arrived monsters have been fighting the war for years. There's a room completely composed of flesh, one that's frozen, one room is overgrown by poisonous skeleton plants. The basement has turned into a giant canal structure with a sentient boiler. There's even a fungal cave very reminiscent of The Last of Us. And depending on how you go about it, multiple things can count as an offering, affecting the way the ritual at the end concludes. There's quite a few ways to beat this game, but most of them require you to collect 4 offerings of any kind and join the astronomer's ritual. Not every area needs to be explored or even visited, though most places hide either the keys to progress to the next area or one of the offerings. So you need to explore most of the building and unlock each floor by finding the required key items and helping, or hurting, some important NPCs along the way. And the further you venture into the bowels of this building, the more the danger level rises, the higher the risk of losing everything gets, so you want to return frequently to your room and save, without leaving too many threats behind that you need to face again later, because at that point, opportunities to save might get a bit sparse. An additional way to save, maybe tied to a limited resource so it doesn't get too useful, would alleviate some tedium in that regard. That said, you always get to save each morning, so you could just waste some time with some activities at home and go to sleep, but this also brings you closer to your 15 days deadline. Yeah, this whole apocalypse business lasts for about 2 weeks. That's what Sybil tells you at the start of the game. How does she know? I don't know. But yeah, waiting out the apocalypse is a legitimate way to beat the game. And it gives you a somewhat unfulfilling ending. Fitting, since you did nothing, never discovered the truth behind this incident, and never did any growing as a person. But still, a legitimate ending. To achieve this, you could just stay the whole time in your apartment and play video games. At the start of the game you only own 3, but you can find more games by exploring and scavenging, building your collection up to 20. Playing video games always wastes a few hours and affects some of your maintenance stats. I guess that's the best way to call them. These are hidden stats that affect combat and exploration. Things like bad hygiene, making enemies notice you from farther away, hunger, decreasing your health and attack, loneliness, making you hesitate during combat, decreasing your evasion and making you more susceptible to critical hits, and even decreases the amount of XP you receive, since the loneliness keeps you from focusing. And exhaustion lowers your stamina and speed, and can even decrease your stamina further over time. So video games can either boost or lower your morale and calmness, depending on how you do in the game, which is always predetermined. Also, playing a game to completion rewards you with a new combat skill, always tied in a silly way to the playing experience. It is contextualized as your player character having a kind of eureka moment after finishing the game, finding new ways to utilize the newfound skills, or process the experience. After you completed a game, the stat bonuses and also the time your character spends with it get lower, so after a while, it isn't really worth the effort. And since you only have 3, it sooner or later becomes a chore to wait out all of the apocalypse inside your apartment. You don't have to worry about running out of food or anything. While you do receive the negative status effects, you can't actually starve to death or die from sleep deprivation, or typhoid or something due to bad hygiene. It just becomes a slog. So you should at least roam around the building a little bit, if only to collect more video games, or maybe a crossword puzzle. If you need to heal or satiate your hunger, you can cook. For that you need ingredients and you can mix some of them to create all kinds of different foods. They heal your HP as well as your stamina, depending on the type of food and also your skill as a cook, which increases as you prepare more meals. Cooking meals is the most efficient way to restore your whole party's HP and stamina, since you always share the food with all your friends, but the healing doesn't seem to be lowered, no matter how many people sit at the table. Another important and useful activity in your apartment is crafting. You can mix any 2 materials to create something new. Throwables, medicine, items used for exploration, and any discovered recipe is saved and can be crafted from a quick selection, as long as you have the required ingredients. But due to another limitation of the engine, items that can be crafted from different ingredient combinations are listed multiple times, like the Molotov cocktails that can be crafted with any kind of strong alcohol and a piece of cloth. It is technically possible to account for that and program it in a way where this isn't the case, but it's very convoluted and tedious work and, in all honesty, not worth the effort. The ingredients you find later in the game lead to a wide variety of recipes, and some of the items you get to craft are pretty powerful, so it's in your best interest to make the most out of that system. If you want to experiment, just play around with the different ingredients after you've saved the game. Then you also know which combinations lead to less desirable outcomes. Each day you can also use the sink and the shower in your bathroom to brush your teeth and take a shower. This not only raises your hygiene stat, it also every now and then has your character reflect on past deeds and events, and on the nature of morality during the apocalypse. This doesn't really change anything in the game or your interactions with other characters, but it gives you a bit more insight into your character. Or I guess a possible version of your character, because he isn't really that defined. He's not a completely blank slate, but you can mold him with the many decisions you get to make during the game. Some of these decisions aren't all that important, but others get rather dark and serious, and might not only change the ending, but also a number of bigger and smaller aspects of the game, including the party members you get to recruit. Many of these decisions are part of your exploration and even combat when you try to avoid killing certain targets or use certain items or respond to special dialogue options. Not everyone is outright hostile, but you get the option to attack and kill pretty much everyone, which leads to all kinds of little secrets and oddities and sometimes new ways to approach a challenge. But there's one more type of social interaction in the game. Whenever you spend time in your apartment, there's a chance that you might get a visitor. It always starts with a knock on the door, to which you can respond in a variety of ways. You can open the door, you can look through the peephole, you can ask who's there, or ignore whoever's at your door. Yeah, that's a good idea for now. In the game though, it is generally a good idea to go against your better judgment and invite any visitor in, no matter how strange they appear. The game warns you that a lot of dangerous people roam around the building, and a few actually come to your door with bad intentions. But most encounters are beneficial to you. Many are scavengers who trade their wares with you, some do you a favor in exchange for a few supplies. And then there are those who might become friends. So randomly a mystery person appears at your doorstep, sometimes they want something of you, sometimes they just want to chat. The huge, scary, Jason-like brute immediately joins your team, while the junk scavenger trades with you a few times before he offers to accompany you. Some party members are just found along the way, others require you to complete a little quest, and others again join you if you complete a challenge in a specific way. And this is once again an RPG Maker game where the developer went out of his way to make every party member feel different. Of course, it's pretty standard for each party member in a JRPG to have their strengths and weaknesses and have different abilities to complement each other's fighting styles. But some games go the extra mile, give each character some quirks to make them more unique. There's a hobo who always only accompanies you for the rest of the current day, after you've bribed him with a sandwich, and he is accompanied by his little rat buddy, who attacks independently from him but doesn't take up a party slot. The scavenger is able to use healing items that are normally not available during combat. The little girl can hide from enemies and play tricks on them that confuse or otherwise impede them, but in exchange for that, she loses the ability to use the guard maneuver. The stalker killer can, well, stalk the enemy and make them more susceptible to attacks and critical hits, and needs a bladed weapon for her special attacks. And is also some kind of demon who can suck out the souls of enemies and friends. The rat boy has a dedicated unarmed special attack and can copy you during fights as a free action, letting him act twice each turn. The combat system gets surprisingly deep with all the unique characters and highly varied loadouts, but you never actually have to engage with all its intricacies. You can rely on the same tactics for the vast majority of fights. Mostly relying on high damage output is enough to get through. The rest is going for attacks that stun and the odd bleeding or burn inflicting ability to keep the damage constantly going, even when you spend a turn healing. Not everyone joins you in combat though. Some of your newfound friends just stay in the apartment and help out with some tasks or bring you gifts. And they bring their own set of special cutscenes. They chime in on a conversation, at times sharing their insight on a puzzle, and sometimes they join in on an activity in your apartment and you bond over it. Some like to watch you play video games or backseat game. Sometimes there's even a scene between two of your party members, and those especially show a lot of humanity. Some of them are actually quite heartwarming. You wouldn't expect that from a game that looks like this and has you witness and commit all kinds of atrocities. There are so many cute little moments. You can take care of a friendly landmine, and as long as you don't use it in battle, it just lives in your bedroom and always appreciates getting pet. The crazy stalker killer bonds with the little rat boy, and when he draws a new mask for her, she actually starts wearing it, which even changes her character portrait in menus and combat. There are quite a few heartwarming scenes with the rat kid, and it all starts with you adopting it. Whenever you touch a cockroach, it crawls into your inventory and scuttles away when you're back in your apartment. And if you allow them to live, they begin to leave friendly messages for you. Though you can also choose to go to war with them. There's more scenes like that, and also a lot more scenes just meant as a funny little diversion. Though they all give you more insight into your party member's character. By exploring thoroughly or taking the time to listen to the many colorful characters you meet, even those that try to hurt you, you can find a lot of these little moments. Get to know all these strange people who might at first appear like horrible monsters, but are often just sad creatures, as scared and confused by all this as you are. Many of them are still dangerous, but not always by choice. And they gladly take the hand, though not always gently, of anyone who offers them a bit of help, or a few nice words, or just a bit of understanding. But let's not fool ourselves here. This isn't a fun and peaceful game where nothing bad happens. Most of what happens is bad. Even the nice moments always keep a bit of insidiousness nearby, and even your friends cannot fully be trusted, at least story-wise. They don't actually go against you, but it is implied that there will be a point in the future where they might commit another horrible act. Most of them are already abominations, and their fleeting sanity won't keep them friendly forever. The game is full of tragic moments. Sometimes you're allowed to intervene, but other times there's nothing you can do. The family that got bitten by their mutated, teething baby has turned into tooth monsters. You can maybe save one of the kids, but for the rest, any help comes too late. The lady from downstairs grows new heads and limbs each day. She seems to be fine at first, all things considered, until she loses control and her extra body parts start attacking the other tenants. She begs you to destroy her, since she doesn't want to murder her neighbors and she can taste their blood and flesh inside her other mouths. Yeah, this game goes hard on the Lovecraftian, or I guess more like Junji Ito style horror, where the true extent of it is hard to grasp and terrifying if you manage to. One hallway got weirdly stretched out and you find a pipe sticking out of a crumbled wall with blood dripping out of it. You hear a woman's voice from it that tells you how she one morning just found a weird tunnel in her home. So she followed it, but it became tighter and tighter with each step, until she had to crawl, then slither through it. And now she can't turn back and it gets tighter still. Damn, this is the stuff of nightmares. Not scary in a common way, just incredibly disturbing. Not that there aren't some outright scary moments. This all is helped by some incredible sound design. You can hear footsteps, papers on the floor rustling when you walk through, doors opening and closing. You sometimes hear the sounds the monsters make. There's the odd startle, but the game stays classy and doesn't overuse it. The music as well is excellent. Not always catchy. The music is more moody, trying to unnerve you. Even with the more melodic songs, there's some pitch bending applied to the notes, making it always sound a bit off. Some songs have erratic arpeggios. One song gets slower and quieter the longer it goes on, filling you with dread as to what is going to happen. It ranges from terrifying or anxiety-inducing to calm and peaceful, even joyful with the in-game video game soundtracks, to even inspiring. The music, and sometimes its absence, does a great job setting the mood, and it perfectly complements the dark and uncanny or often bizarre visuals. Sometimes, often even, the game gets silly with its encounters, like with the boss fight in an elevator accompanied by cliché elevator music, or the fight against a car trying to drive into hell with you inside. Or a moment close to the end of the game when suddenly a bunch more major mechanics are introduced, like a trading card minigame, weapon crafting and even base building, just to have it lead to nothing. And yeah, the game likes to have some fun. Getting turned into a vending machine and being only able to communicate by writing on soda cans the other person has to buy is as much body horror as growing tentacles or extra mouths. But it has some silliness to it. This person will never again be the same. But on the other hand, it's cool to have a vending machine buddy. But these silly moments don't take away from the dread and horror. I've seen the term Absurdist Horror floating around and it fits many encounters in this game perfectly. Maybe the painter who painted copies of himself and they all share the same consciousness and memories doesn't sound all that horrible at first glance. But if you think about it, the idea of remembering painting yourself and being painted by yourself, the existential dread this might cause. Some people you meet in this game are trying to get used to their new form, though that still might lead to them hurting others. And many people got completely insane, relishing the carnage or just don't understand anymore how else to interact with others, if not violently. Some even are fully aware of what they have become and welcome the newfound power. You will witness a lot of death and carnage. There is so much disturbing stuff in here. But even with all this, in the end, the game is about keeping your humanity, even in the face of incomprehensible horrors. There is no good ending to this game. The world as we know it is over. Humanity cannot just recover from that. We can only make the best of it. The whole game is a trip, a highly engaging experience, despite the clunky systems that strangely get less cumbersome the more the game goes on. Like they are part of the insanity that you slowly get as well drawn in. Yeah, I guess you just get used to it after a while. There is a lack of polish in a few places, mostly things the dev didn't account for. Like repeating tutorial messages when you interact with different objects used for a certain tutorial. Or the crack in the wall in your bedroom where Sybil appears that you can examine right at the start before she shows up for the first time, which then shows you the same message as any other time when she's not there, referring to her before you even know her. Sometimes when you raise or lower your maintenance stats across certain values, or maybe at times where the game doesn't know what to do with it, the next time the value changes, it shows you a wrong notification. Or maybe the notification is right and the systems trigger the wrong change. It's hard to know since you can't really check these stats. Sometimes sprites disappear because you talk to a person from the wrong side and no graphic has been created for that direction. Sometimes you see a cutscene triggering but it immediately stops. But nothing of that distracts all that much from the experience. Calling them minor issues would be an overstatement. From what I understand, the game released not entirely finished, and it still isn't. Though that might have changed with the latest update at the time this video releases. But the game has been actively worked on even after release. The dev is pumping out update after update, fixing bugs, some rebalancing, adding in some quest lines that were supposed to be here at launch, and a lot of other little things here and there. The game, in pretty much all its iterations, has still been a complete experience. It wasn't broken or anything. If this were a AAA multi-million-dollar release from a major studio, I wouldn't be that forgiving. Though to be honest, then the problems would be even bigger and the missing parts more apparent. With this, it's a single developer's work of passion that he had to put out at some point and that he is still diligently working on to deliver on promises he made. And you know what? This is commendable. He could have just axed the missing plotlines and called it a day. No one would have known. But he's following through on all the promises and then some. You feel the passion that went into the game in every encounter, every monster design, every weird idea. There is so much unique and interesting stuff in this game that the 15 days deadline almost seems a bit short. There's no way you have the time to experience everything. Something like a New Game Plus where you don't automatically trigger the ending after day 15 would have been really nice. But with that said, this has been a very satisfying experience, and I mean, you could always start a fresh run and try different things. So I think it's apparent that I really like this game, and not just as a Halloween treat. Though it is a very good choice for the spooky season. Maybe there is a thing or two I can take away from the game. No matter what's going on out there, I shouldn't stay cooped up in my apartment, especially if I'm running out of supplies. Okay, here goes nothing. Ah!